Olá, meninos e meninas. Bom dia, boa tarde, or boa noite. I hope you're well wherever you are. Well, in today's lesson, I would like to talk to you a little bit about the past tense in the Portuguese language. This is just a little introduction to guide you throughout the course. And I really hope you enjoyed this introduction. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask me in our lessons or in the comment box below. Okay, so to get us started, I would like to talk about the past tense in Portuguese. Um, One of the things that I want to talk about the past tense in Portuguese, I want you to call it as well pretérito perfeito, or called the perfect preteric. Um, let's understand what it is. What is the simple past tense or pretérito perfeito? Passado simples ou pretérito perfeito em português. So the simple past in Portuguese actually expresses actions that were completed and finished in the past. That's quite simple. Okay? This is how we use it. Another example is we use it for events that have already ended. Something that has been an action that has been finished in the past. And of course, to make things a lot easier, all I have to say to you is that the simple past tense is the same as the past tense in the English language. So things get slightly easier. One of the things that we can do to identify the simple past tense in the Portuguese language is try to identify some time expressions. There are some time expressions that are used only when we are talking about the simple past tense in Portuguese. And these expressions are ontem, ontem. Please repeat after me. Ontem, yesterday. Hoje de manhã, this morning. Ontem de manhã, ontem à tarde, or ontem à noite. So yesterday morning, yesterday afternoon, yesterday evening. 2 dias atrás, 2 dias atrás. Anteontem, anteontem. Ontem à noite, ontem à noite. Last night. Ou semana passada or mês passado. Of course, we can think about lots of different ways to say, for example, semana passada, mês passado, ano passado, last year, for instance. Okay, so I want you to bear in mind that these time expressions, they are essential for us to identify if a sentence is in the simple past tense or what we know now, pretérito perfeito. Here are some examples of sentences in the past tense in Portuguese. Let's imagine we said, meu pai viajou para Paris semana passada. Meu pai viajou para Paris semana passada. So my dad traveled to Paris last week. Minhas amigas e eu comemos pizza no jantar ontem à noite. Eu conversei com meu amigo brasileiro em português anteontem. Notice that these examples, they are formed, they all describe the past. And we can identify that these sentences are in the past whenever we see verbs like viajar in the past, viajou, ou comemos, which is the past of comer, and conversei, conversei, which is the past tense of conversar. And also we have time expressions that tell us that these sentences are in the past tense, like semana passada, the action was finished last week. Yes, ontem à noite, so yesterday evening. Okay? E anteontem, the day before yesterday. Okay? So now, one of the things that I want to focus, and I would like you to concentrate on that one, is how we actually conjugate verbs no pretérito perfeito, or in the simple past tense. I just want you to remember that the verbs in order for us to understand how we conjugate verbs in the simple past tense, we need to understand the rules for regular verbs and some rules for irregular verbs. The regular verbs in Portuguese, they are divided into three main groups. And these groups are verbs ending in AR, like cantar, estudar, ou trabalhar. The verbs ending in ER, like beber, viver, aprender. Or verbs ending in IR, like GBG, assistir, desistir. Okay? So for regular verbs, guys, the good thing about the regular verbs is that there exists there is a set of rules specific for these verbs, so we can not worry too much about these verbs because there are rules we can follow. Okay? Meanwhile, when we talk about irregular verbs, um, unfortunately, the story is not quite the same as the regular verbs, and that's because it does not follow a fixed pattern or conjugation. So that means we have to put slightly more effort to learn the irregular verbs. Now, what I would like us to do, we are going to talk initially about the regular verbs. Let's talk about the easy part, okay? As I said, in order for us to learn how to conjugate verbs in irregular verbs, regular verbs, we need to remember verbs ending in AR, okay? What are the rules? Let's say, for example, we are going to conjugate the verb cantar in the simple past tense. How does it work? So, cantar. Eu cantei. Tu cantaste. Você cantou. Ele cantou. Ela cantou. A gente cantou. Nós cantamos. Vós cantastes. Vocês cantaram. Eles cantaram. Elas cantaram. So notice that this is how we conjugate verbs, regular verbs ending in AR. All you have to do is just be attentive about the endings, okay? So when the verb ends in AR, so eu cantei, ei, eu, ei, tu, haste, cantaste, você, cantou. Look, it's the same. Você, ele, and ela, or a gente cantou. Nós cantamos, that's quite fixed. Vós cantastes e vocês, eles, and elas cantaram, são aram, okay? So, eu, with the termination a for the verbs, tu, haste, você, ele, ela, or a gente. Ou, nós amos, vós hastes, vocês, eles, and elas aram. Simple, isn't it? So remember, for any regular verb ending in AR, this is what you are going to do. Okay? And the same procedure will be followed by verbs ending in ER. Let's say, for example, of course, the termination, because the termination is different, so I imagine the ending of the verbs are going to be just slightly different. Okay? Let's say, for example, we conjugate the verb beber. Okay? So, eu bebi, tu bebestes, você, oh, desculpa, tu bebeste, você bebeu, ele bebeu, ela bebeu, a gente bebeu, nós bebemos, vós bebestes, vocês beberam, eles beberam e elas beberam. And notice that the ending of this verb, of the conjugation of the verb, varies just slightly with verbs with ER, okay? So, eu bebi, eu e, tu, este, você, ele, ela, eu, a gente, eu, of course, nós bebemos, emos, vós estes, vocês eram, eles eram, elas eram. Okay? So all you have to do now is make the associations. You just marry the person of the discourse with the ending of the verb. All right? With the verb ending. Okay, so this is the rule for verbs ending in ER. Now, of course, we can talk about verbs ending in IR. So let's say, for example, we conjugate the verb abrir. Okay, when we conjugate the verb abrir, that's how it works. Eu abri, tu abriste. Você abriu, ele abriu, ela abriu, a gente abriu, nós abrimos, vós abristes, vocês abriram, eles abriram e elas abriram. So that is how we conjugate verbs in the past tense ending in IR. Eu abri, eu, I, tu, estes, você, iu, ele, iu, ela, iu, a gente, iu, nós, imos, vós, istes, vocês, iram, eles, iram, elas, iram. Okay, so this is all you have to remember in order to conjugate different verbs. Please do not forget that in European Portuguese, it's quite common for us to use tu and vós in spoken Portuguese. Meanwhile, a gente is used mainly in the Brazilian Portuguese to describe nós. All right? So these are some important things we have to keep in mind. Please keep them in mind. And it's very simple. All right? Do Brazilians actually use tu and vós? Yeah, Brazilians do use tu and vós, but they use tu, for example, tu abristes a porta. This is very poetic. This is more formal in Brazilian Portuguese. So we tend to use você for everything. Okay? So, vamos praticar. I have some phrases here in which I'd love us to read them together and notice how the verbs have been conjugated, and most importantly, notice the time expressions that follow each sentence. Sentence number 1, for example, repeat after me. Nós falamos sobre o problema ontem. Okay? Nós falamos, okay? And ontem, which is the time expression, yesterday. Número 2, eu comi a pizza toda. So I ate all the pizza, okay? Eu comi, past. So, eu, comer, eu, ir. Comer, comi. 3. Você assistiu o jogo na TV ontem? Você assistiu o jogo na TV ontem? Did you watch the game on TV yesterday? Quantas caixas de cerveja você comprou? Eu comprei 5 caixas. Okay, again, this is another example of a sentence in the past tense, even though it doesn't describe, it doesn't have time expressions to tell you when, but you can tell that the action was done in the past and it was finished in the past. So, quantas cervejas você comprou? Yeah, so eu comprei 5 cervejas. I bought 5 caixas de cerveja, desculpa. 5 craters of beer, right? Número 5, eles comeram o bolo inteiro que eu fiz. Eles comeram o bolo inteiro que eu fiz, né? Eles comeram. You see? Número 6, ela assistiu todos os episódios da última temporada de Game of Thrones. Ela assistiu todos os episódios da última temporada de Game of Thrones. Número 7, ela escolheu o vestido mais caro da loja. Ela escolheu o vestido mais caro da loja. So she chose the most expensive dress in the shop. Number 8, nós esquecemos de fechar a janela do quarto antes de viajarmos. Nós esquecemos a janela do quarto antes de viajarmos. So we forgot the keys of the bedroom before we traveled. Okay, so again, notice that all these expressions, they are in the past. Some of them are quite easy to identify because of the time expression. We can also say that they are easy to identify because of the termination of the verb. But most importantly, notice that all these sentences, they are finished in the past. They are past events. Okay? Now, let's talk about a topic that's very important. We are going to talk about verbos irregulares em português. How do we conjugate verbos irregulares em português? As most of you know, verbos irregulares means that the conjugation of the verb will not follow a specific pattern. So that means, unfortunately, we need to work slightly more in our irregular verbs. Hence, I told you in class that we are going to practice these verbs in the classroom as well. Okay? But what I would like to do to you, I would like to open a door of opportunities, and I just decided to put together some ideas in which you could use for you to help your learning with irregular verbs. Is that okay? So I hope these tips are going to help you learn the irregular verbs. Okay? So let's say, for example, tip number 1. My first tip, my first dica is when you are learning verbs in the past, okay, try to group them, do some pattern grouping. That means is you have to learn verbs that follow the same irregularity pattern together because some verbs can be quite similar, like the verb dizer, fazer, and trazer. They have similar conjugations, so why not learn them? They have the same root, so why not learn them first? Perhaps, don't know. You choose how you are going to learn. But this is an important tip that you should follow, in my opinion. Okay? as tip number two, we need to think about high frequency verbs first. So we need to start with the most commonly used verbs. So there are verbs, of course, that we tend to use more often in the past tense, like the verb ser. Ah, eu fui para a escola, or the verb ir, right? I went to school yesterday. Verbo estar, okay, which is the verb to be. So verb to be, verb to go, verb to have, um, verb to do or to make, fazer, dizer, the verb to say, the verb ver, which is the verb to see, the verb vir, which is the verb to come, okay, pôr, which is the verb to put, and querer, the verb want, poder. There are, of course, other verbs that are classified as irregular in Portuguese, and we need to learn them as they are. Okay, so think about these verbs as your priority. Okay, the verbs that we commonly use, we use frequently in our speech, in our everyday speech. All right, so that would be of your advantage. As tip, as dica number three, why not trying some memorization techniques? For example, why don't you create some short phrases you'll use frequently? Okay? I went to the club last weekend. Eu fui para o clube final de semana. I went to work yesterday and I left it early. Eu fui para o trabalho ontem e saí cedo. Um, I I ate pizza for breakfast 2 days ago. Eu comi pizza no café da manhã ou no pequeno almoço 2 dias atrás. All right, so start creating your sentences. Why not creating your own flashcards? And why would you create flashcards? You would create flashcards to memorize those verbs. Okay, let's say this week I'm going to focus in the verb ir, to go. I want to focus on the verb to have. So I put them in a flashcard to help you learn these verbs throughout the week. Okay? Or practice by writing a diary using the past tense, because we use the past tense a lot for everything we do. Okay? Or used spaced repetition apps, like we know very well. Duolingo is a fantastic app, for instance, to use spaced repetitions. And of course, there are other apps that you could be using to help you practice your vocabulary. Another important thing that we have to do is contextualize. So practical context. So what do I mean by that? Let's say, for example, use verbs in real everyday situation. Do you remember the class that we had where we talked about daily routines? You know, brush your teeth, go to school, go to work out. Those are examples of things that we do every day. So why not put them in context? But this time, try saying them in the past tense as opposed to saying, of using these daily routines in the present. Okay, practice telling stories about your past. Think about your past. Write down what you did yesterday. Write down about some facts about you. Okay, why not? Or do exercises answering what did you do yesterday? What did you do yesterday? Yesterday, I went to the park. Yesterday, I danced with my friend. Or I danced with my friend yesterday. Okay, so things like that. Even though I gave you these examples in English, I want you to think that way in the transfer these ideas into the Portuguese language. Describe your weekend using irregular verbs, okay? That is a fantastic way to practice the past tense. Remember, we talk about the past tense a lot in our own language. So definitely both in Portuguese and English, we are going to talk about the past tense a lot. All right. Another example that we could think about is regular practices. Again, this is a very, very important, and this has always been essential for our learning. You know, at least if you could, as a suggestion, not as an obligation, but a suggestion, dedicate 15 minutes daily to irregular verbs. That could probably uh, help you learn irregular verbs quicker, or regularly review those already learned. Which is, there's no crime in going back and revising what you learned. Practice using conjugation or conjugating verbs out loud. Why not? Appreciate listening to your own voice is speaking Portuguese. And always ask yourself questions. Am I enunciating those words right? Um, I need to get better at this. What am I going to do to get better at my pronunciation? There's no crime in that. Always remember, it's gonna be okay. You're gonna be able um, to speak this language beautifully. And record audio using these verbs. Why not? Again, practicing listening to your own voice is perfect, you know, because it's helping you build confidence in spoken Portuguese. As number six is something that I have been emphasizing since we started our course. Accept mistakes. Okay, in communication, in conversation, the most important thing is never let the listener waiting for you communicate. You can communicate with one sentence. You can communicate something with a whole um, one word. All right. So think about that. So making mistakes is part of the learning process. So just correct yourself. You know, if you make a mistake, just correct yourself and move on. Just keep going, keep going. That's how you're gonna get better. Remember, practice makes you perfect. Okay, that is the rule. And the seventh advice is for you to be patient. You know, so patience and consistency, they are key. It's the whole story of not giving up. You have to be patient, but most importantly, you have to just speak. All right? And be consistent. Don't be afraid. Okay? Just speak. All right? And yeah, I really do hope that this little lesson has helped you kickstart your learning process of the past tense in the Portuguese language. And I so look forward to seeing you in class. And I really do hope you enjoyed this video lesson. And please be free. Please communicate with me if you need me. And if you have any questions about the past tense, let me know. It will be a pleasure to help you and leave comments. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you in the next class. And happy studies. Bye bye.